Hi there, folks. Dan Fritter. Once more. What's the date? I always forget the date. 8th. Hi there, folks. Dan Fritter with Caliber Magazine. It's September 8th, meaning that there is 12 days remaining in the 44th federal election. Just about a week and a half, I guess, now. It's Wednesday morning, and the polls are once more relatively flat. We don't see a lot of movement in the CPC's favor or them losing votes. The CPC also seems to be relatively static overnight. We've seen, obviously, much discussion around the PPC, but not a ton of movement, again, as usual. So we're largely staying static, but we are still seeing, which is a good way to put it, because it honestly feels like things are a bit static, because we're seeing the same arguments being rehashed over and over again. This morning, probably the latest news as of 8:30 Pacific time is that Mark Gerritsen, formerly a Liberal MP, currently running to be a Liberal MP again, has filed a formal complaint with Elections Canada to investigate any potential relationship between Fred Delory, who is Erin O'Toole's campaign manager and has been since, I believe, 2017. Yes, it's not the most exciting stuff. Is somehow colluding with the NFA and has passed information over to the NFA to somehow help the NFA in their effort to get Conservatives elected. Suffice to say, Fred was a professional lobbyist before he worked for the NFA. He has been a professional worker in Ottawa ever since, and that is a pretty basic rule of lobbying. It's right up there with, like, don't give government people handouts and money or bribes or gifts and stuff, but you mean
like the coalition for you mean like the gun control organization receiving liberal funds,
or perhaps even things like certain Doctors for Protection from Guns getting $300,000 from Airbnb, who doesn't seem to be an organization with a massive vested interest in firearms laws, but does have a large interest in short-term rental legality in Canada.
Interesting, right?
Odd. Yeah. So it's kind of getting into the pretty weedy gamesmanship that political nerds like us probably keep track of, but no one else really gives a crap about. So, Phil, what's your take? I mean, you've had the weekend off in air quotes as you take care of family stuff and whatnot. But what do you think? Where are we at? Where are gun owners and Conservatives at? Or more importantly, where are gun owners at?
So it's been a week since I've been on Gunvote, I believe, right? About a week, right? And things happened. So we obviously had a fulsome discussion over the weekend over climate change, over foreign affairs. I mean, no, of course not. We talked about guns for 5 days.
It's not like people are struggling to afford basic things like homes and clean drinking water, and that we have a massive problem with people killing themselves with drugs.
It's not
and
like
whatnot.
we had a massive, we increased the national debt, massively in the last year because of a global pandemic. But you know what? The most important thing that we need to talk about, so the last 5 days was firearms and firearms policy.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely.
What a waste of time. And I think that's kind of reflective over the polls. I mean, if we check the Nanos dailies, and if we checked kind of the other daily polls and ecos and everything like that, nothing has really changed, right? I mean, the Conservatives have managed to hold their lead. The Liberals may have come up a little bit, right? The story, I think, is basically ecos has the PPC up over a ridiculous amount. I mean, anywhere from 6 to 11. But as a gun voter, it's really difficult to separate what we see in the media and Twitter sphere versus what is really happening in election world, right?
So I saw, interestingly, in consuming all of this random political media, there's a podcast that's quite excellent. If anyone out there is really enjoying this kind of political stuff, there's a podcast out there by David Hurley called Through the Looking Glass, where he does his job running focus groups, and he talks to apparently swing voters. Now, it's pretty apparent that a couple of those swing voters probably might have checked the wrong box on the entry form, because they definitely aren't swing voters. But nonetheless, it's very interesting conversations, because you get these. It's fascinating to kind of get out of the bubble and see guys that are like, I'm a baseball coach. I don't own guns. I'm an NDP guy. I work with kids all the time. I don't like violence, but you know what? I have friends that own guns, and I think, you know, this flip flop on guns wasn't necessarily the right take, because what's going on with guns isn't really the right way to go. And it's interesting to see that, you know, even amongst focus groups of quote unquote Joe voter, that maybe we finally reached an inflection point on guns where people are ready to accept that everything beyond this is just penny wise and pound foolish, of just throwing money down a political rabbit hole instead of actually solving problems. So, and also too, I don't think anyone listening to this podcast would argue with the notion that when you are out and about in the grocery stores and you're standing in line, what you hear people talking about around you is never guns. Ever. I have never been standing there and thought, that lady behind me, she's talking about AR-15s and AKs a lot. No, it's always like, my son's not going to be able to afford a home. I'm not sure what's going to happen when my kid goes back to school with COVID. Like, it's never an issue. And to be honest, I don't know why the Conservatives got stuck on it. I mean, I know that the media kept hounding them, but like, at some point, I think probably a lot of people listening would agree. You kind of wish that you just have Erin O'Toole walk up to a mic and go, look, guys, if you want to talk about guns, I'm not going to, because the average Canadian doesn't care right now. We have more pressing concerns.
Definitely. The Conservatives should have seen this coming. I mean, they should have seen this coming miles away. Fred Delorme was a registered lobbyist for the National Firearms Association. That is not that's not up for debate or anything like that, right?
There should have been a counterpoint ad filmed 3 months ago with probably 32 different segments in it that they could plug in and replace depending on what the Liberal policies were going to be, just because they knew that the Liberals were going to launch a campaign with restrictions, new restrictions. So they should have just slotted that into their counterpoint. And they knew they were going to get attacked on any easing of the restrictions put in place by Trudeau. So like, why didn't they prepare? It's odd. It's very odd.
Knowing who is in the war room and who's kind of running the campaigns. My inside baseball guesstimation, right? And this is not knowing, like, I don't know. I don't talk to anybody.
Inside track.
I don't talk to anybody in Central Campaign. I don't really know.
Do you have a secret deal with the Conservative Party?
Yes, exactly. Phil? Obviously. I think they thought their answer on Thursday was super clever. I think basically they thought to themselves, you know, let's do we're not going to assault rifles, winky winky, or we're going to keep the ban on assault rifles, winky winky, was clever enough for them to actually dodge that. And it didn't. It blew up in their face. Political strategists always try to think that there's a clever solution to everything, right? That there's you know, we can promise the world to people and we can, you know, and we can kind of hoodwink the public. And you can do it, you know, 8 times, 7 times out of 10, right? But, you know, when you're going to get burned, you're going to get burned. The party got burned, right? On this firearm issue. It's, you know, the media, the Liberals and their surrogates within the media just clamped on it, wouldn't let go, right? And that's why we ended up talking about firearms for 5 days. The Conservatives obviously, you know, looked at their internal polling and then, you know, had an oh shit moment and said, oh shit, we need to go do something. And then they hit the panic button, right? And it was pretty obvious, right? I mean, there was, knowing that this was going to be an issue, knowing that firearms would be a stick that the Liberals would beat the Conservatives on even before this campaign started. There's no reason why the Conservative Party platform needs to have, you know, literally a page or a page and a half on firearms policy. Why? Right? Who does that appeal to? Right? I mean, that appeals to, I mean, you and me, obviously, right? But
and that's the confusing thing, right? is if you're gonna take the attitude of the wink wink nudge nudge, which, to be quite blunt, and for any newspaper type people that are trying to clip this podcast for things, this is past elections where this has happened. There's been lots of wink wink nudge nudge. Harper did that all the time. Of, oh, well, you know, there's a little glib line in there that you can interpret however you want. And we had the various gun organizations at that point, essentially, and I'm thinking back, you know, a few years here, were essentially representing the party to gun owners and saying, go vote for the CPC because they're our best chance, because they effectively are. And the CPC was doing the bare minimum to get by because effectively that was the best route to take at the time. But 2021 isn't 2011. And Trudeau isn't Martin or Chrétien, and O'Toole isn't Harper. And I think that's where there's been the fundamental misunderstanding on this Conservatives part. It's not necessarily that they played the strategy wrong. I think they read the players wrong.
And more importantly, C-71 isn't the long gun registry, right?
No.
The C-71 is, you know, it's a really, really easy. The long gun registry, right? I mean, you can fight the long gun registry because you have the farmers surrogate, right? The farmers and the hunters, right?
Yeah.
And that's a great that's a great battle to frame, right? With C-71, right, and scary black rifles, right? Guns are scary. Soccer moms think that guns are scary, right? And that's a losing proposition. And if you put a 3-gun shooter or a service rifle shooter, I mean, you can have whoever, but it's something that your regular Canadian can't. They can't. What's the word? They can't associate with that.
Relate.
They can't relate.
It's not relatable.
It's completely not relatable, right?
But that's where I think, in this case, it's a case of it's little things that for example, and please, dear God, if someone is listening to this from the Conservative Party, stop referring to it as gang violence. Please, Jesus. I mean, in the current climate, and there's a pun in this election if I've ever heard one, because just bring up climate. In the current climate, this violence is organized crime. The issue here is not gang violence. These are not disorganized small cells of 12 guys walking down the street, snapping their fingers, going to get in a freaking, little stabby while singing some show tunes. These are large, multinational, organized gangs, crime syndicates. And we've seen them crop up under the Trudeau Liberals. It's literally been a 2015 and onward thing when the money laundering, the home prices, they're all tied into this organized crime. And watching Erin O'Toole get up during that Saturday morning speech in Vancouver and reference again gang violence while talking about public safety, while also talking about guns, is ignoring the massive tie of you can have a gun policy that is more supportive of effective combating organized crime than anything's on the table now. And that lack of political will to stand behind it, that's where I think they misread it, because I mean, he needs to be the the right choice kind of guy. And I don't mean the pun on that. I mean the guy that takes a pragmatic approach, that looks back, takes all of the expert advice. And I wish that he'd done it that way. But they obviously feel like there's more votes to the left. So what do gun owners do with this? Like, we have gained a piece of information now that we can infer that the Conservative Party detects there's probably more votes to the left to be gained in the urban ridings. We can infer that the Toronto, Vancouver, probably Quebec, you would agree, maybe Atlantic provinces are still the main priorities where guns typically don't play as well. So what do we do? What do we do with this information now?
Well, I mean, we're back down to game theory, right? I mean, there's no prize for second place in first past the post, right? We will probably still win the popular vote, right? And this comes down to seats, right? And where is it going to play, right? We're up in Atlantic Canada, that's good, right? We're maybe slightly ahead in Ontario, right? The 905, Conservatives are ahead 905. Great, maybe that's who you have to appeal to. That's where this election will be settled, right? Conservatives are up in British Columbia slightly, right? So
would you say, like, you're mentioning the different regions here? Would you say that would it make sense for gun owners to? I'm struggling to say this here. Would you give different advice to gun owners from here on out? Like we say, there's 12 days left in the election. Mm-hmm. If you're going to get off your ass and do something to help us keep our guns, because if Trudeau wins, they all get ruined. Would you give different advice to gun owners in different areas then? Like if I'm a gun owner in Toronto and you meet me on the street, would your advice to me be different than a gun owner in downtown Calgary or Halifax or Vancouver? Like is there one piece of advice that gun owners can take home kind of nationally and work with? Like,
absolutely. And that's make the Liberals lose, right? That's the strategy, right? Is basically deny the Liberals government. Because regardless of what Erin says about guns, right? I mean, let's push the Conservatives to not firearms friendly, but firearms agnostic, right? It doesn't matter about the Liberals. The Liberals will completely destroy the sport within Canada. Period. Right? Hands down. Yes. Right. Given that binary choice, right? I know who I'm going to vote for, or I know who I'm not going to vote for. Right, and that's really what the question is Canadians typically vote governments out, right? And yes, what is the strategic situation to vote the Liberals out? So if you live in a close, in a British Columbia riding where it splits Liberal and NDP, or an Ontario riding where it splits on Liberal and NDP, right? I would say fuck the Liberals.
So now I can tell it because I've made this argument to gun owners before. Mm-hmm. The counterpoint is always, well, I'm not an NDP voter. Right. I can't vote for the NDP. They just want to ban guns. And, the commoner, I'm not a communist. We're not going to get into that. What would you tell? I mean, I obviously would say you're not voting for the NDP. You're voting to keep a Liberal out of the Prime Minister's office, is what that is. Is it really just that simple? I mean, it seems that way to me, but I mean,
first past the post, right? I mean, if we had electoral,
not second past the post.
if we had electoral reform, right, where it would be,
we don't yet. I thought 2015 was the last election.
I heard it was a promise in 2015, right? But it's not, right?
Son of a gun. I'll just go pour myself a clean glass of water from this. Anyways, other promises, but. All right. Well, I mean, so basically we're back to the strategic voting, which I think interesting because that's what this podcast has, to be quite blunt, always been about. Mm-hmm. We're going to start wrapping it up here because we've reached the 60-minute mark and we're trying to keep these under 20 minutes. Phil, any closing notes, any plugs there?
If you're considering voting the PPC, give your head a check, get a header check. All right. The PPC definitely are on the downwards. The violence, PPC people are actually starting to show up at these violent Justin Trudeau protests. He's thriving on it, right?
And here's another quick note, and this is something that for those that I'm not even going to get into the tinfoil hat. I've seen a bunch of PPC posts on my Facebook page from people that seem to have accounts that were just created because I've been banning them left, right, and center. You click on their profile, they've never made a comment on the page before, they've never interacted with any gun content, but suddenly this new account from 2019 is just PPCing the crap out of my Facebook. A lot of the polls that have the PPC doing very well are polls like Frank Graves, who is a prolific Liberal partisan.
Absolutely.
And there is nothing like momentum, as we all know. I mean, gun owners are incredibly deflated right now because the Conservatives went from 37 to 30%. And the PPC are now elated because they've gone from polling at the 1 to 2% to, according to Frank Graves, 9 to 11% in some areas. Like, guys, come on. You really think 1 in 10 could even tell you the PPC exists? You get 10 Canadians in a room and you ask them to name the leaders of the provincial or the parties, they'll tell you 3 names at most. They'll tell you Justin Trudeau for sure. They might tell you Jagmeet Singh and Erin O'Toole. They will never tell you Anna May Paul. They'll never tell you Maxime Bernier. They don't even know these parties exist. And moreover, even if those numbers were even half true, let's say the PPC is at 4%, when it comes time to actually drop a ballot in the box, if you're thinking PPC and you're going, you know what, my PPC riding, I'm going to make an impact because they're polling way higher. They're not. When the actual election results come out, the numbers will be at most a third of what they're polling at. Because these fringe parties always do that. Everyone, when you get the phone call, you go, yeah, I hate Erin O'Toole because he said he's going to screw me over as a gun owner. So I'm going to vote for Maxime Bernier. But then when it actually comes time on September 20th, you look at the polls, you think about your paycheck, you think about your taxes, you think about your home prices, you think about your kids going to school, you think about the lever action that your dad gave you that you're going to have to get welded shut because Justin Trudeau doesn't like the magazine tube on it. And you go, actually, I think this is the guy that probably is most likely to give me a good shot here. So, if you're thinking PPC, don't. There. It's that simple.
Exactly.
Right? I don't know what else to tell you. If you own guns and you vote PPC in this country, you literally are helping Justin Trudeau. When I have to get my grandfather-in-law's shotgun tube crimped shut so it doesn't hold more rounds, I'll be thinking of guys like you. Because literally, if they end up returning votes anywhere near 10%, you will have taken a majority from us. That's a fact. I mean, if you take the best upside and you say, okay, the PPC is polling at 11%, let's say Frank is right. Well, if you just bolt 11% onto the CPC, everyone's talking about a CPC majority now because they're talking about a 41 to 45% CPC poll in the face of 28 to 30% on the Liberal side. Wouldn't we all be rather looking at that? Like, you have a choice here. It's insane to me. So I'm right there with Phil in case you can't tell. Phil, he forgot to plug his, or I cut him off before he had a chance, but I will plug his own store to get in for the 20-minute mark.
Canadian Tactical Cowboy
CTC Supplies, Canadian Tactical Cowboy Supplies for all of your shooting needs, for anyone that's looking at getting some high-end stuff or tricking out the things they've got. I am Dan Fritter from Caliber Magazine. If you want to support me, that is calibermag.ca/subscribe. Get a subscription to the magazine. We will mail it to your door 6 times a year. Also register over at gunvote.ca. That is live. We will have content coming up there in 2 days when we are on a 10-day countdown, or maybe even tomorrow. We'll start getting some stuff out there that will be riding specific, and we'll be starting to talk about ridings that gun owners can specifically target. So look for that. So go register there. It's free. We're not going to spam you, nor are we ask for donations. We might just send you one email if you happen to live in a riding that might be a swing. And I think that is it. 20 minutes and 28 seconds on the old recorder. Not too bad. We'll be back tomorrow. I'll see if Phil can join us. If not, I'll try and get someone else on here, and we'll see what happens. Tomorrow, obviously, big news, the English language debate. So come Friday, I guess we'll have lots to talk about. So this has been Gunvote for September 8th. 12 days left to get off your butt, do something, send an email to your gun club, volunteer with your conservative EDA, head over to the 338 poll and see what your local riding is at, and start keeping track of it. Get the email alerts so that on the 20th you can vote for whomever is most likely to replace Trudeau in your riding, or the Liberal in your riding. And that has been Gunvote. I will see you guys tomorrow, and have a great Wednesday.